Okay.
We are the Nepali board for stories like it's statement by Nepali police for it. So this everyone here, and I hope it's going to be very interesting discussion. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. So when Tapti spoke about this, and she asked me to come on board, it had a great resonance. And it's about stories which are close to my heart. And heritage is not only about brick and mortar, but also about intangible. And I think it's more about the intangible. Own the past is a little thing I started. It's about respecting antecedents, to learn from our mistakes, and to pass on age old wisdom to the now and tomorrow. It's up to the people whether they take it or not. Nobody seems to think it's age old or wisdom, but never mind. We take it from there. So when Tapti told me about it, I think this forum is going to deal with issues relating to internal displacement, borders, boundaries, partitions, and the larger question of forced migration. Stories of social dynamics, stratification, survival, and hope. And I think it's very important to bring to the forefront these voices which would have not come otherwise. And they were very interesting forum. I would invite all of them to come and take their seats, please. Anuradha, Subhash Babu. I saw Anuradha first, but Subhash Babu should come up first. Subhash Babu is a very esteemed person.
Shoujo about the last. You made me next one. I know.
Sharda, Lekha, and Orchard Cover. So Sharda, Anuradha, and Lekha couple medals and our esteemed guests, but very, very I would say they're very for this our culture and everyone seems to have and very, very sharp. He's also from the human. He's also Bansari. Yes, yes, yes. So now I hand the mic over to Bobby. How did you and understand? Yeah. Then there are substance and I have to if you don't mind. Oh. Welcome everyone to my audience. Yes. So the moment is arrived, Anuradha. We started this conversation, I think, in September, when I asked Anuradha if she would be agreeable to come to Kolkata, and she said yes. And from then to now, I'm really grateful to all of you for being here. Today, this evening, we really celebrate the human. Yeah. So this evening is all about celebrating storytelling. Storytelling, the art, the craft, conventions of storytelling, and that have endured for centuries. I mean, we all have stories within us. We have stories that we pass down, and they have survived millennia of upheaval and transformation. Each one of us, wittingly or otherwise, we all have stories which we carry, hang them down, and spread them around us. Stories define moments, they define events, but most of all, they honor the individual. Now, it was an individual, a person, 10 years ago, who I met in England, who told me about the day that she spent in London when the war was declared on the 1st of September 1939. And she had written about it, and that was the beginning of a story blog, which we call Past Connect, and that lends its name to this particular talk, which is Past Connect talk. 10 years down the line, we published 150 stories from 15 different countries, where people have shared their experiences, all first-hand experiences, their own or their families, and so forth. Now, they weave their stories around the woof and woof of context and time. And that is exactly what we will be talking about a little later.
Stories swirl around us, they're all there. They are broadly conventional, largely indulgent. We tell stories in our own way. Now, what an online medium did for us was that these stories could be written down and they could be disseminated and it reached far and wide and connected people in ways we were very surprised when we first actually got to know how people connected to these stories. And that itself is a story by itself. I mean, there are invisible readers all across the world. 5 years after starting the blog, we also published a book which was called Flashback Objects, Memories, and the Art of Storytelling. Storytelling comes back in different ways. Now, this evening, the rubrics have been slightly moved so that with the launch of Past Connect Talks, what retains the nub, which is storytelling, but takes the written word back to the space of discussion and discourse. So, we have with us, we have the great pleasure of having with us two authors and one publisher. Sharda Chetri, Anuradha Sharma are authors, and Lekha Rai is a publisher. Unfortunately, the third author, Juren Kadimo, could not come because of official work. But we will be discussing this book as well. So we'll be discussing three books. And for me, as a person from the publishing world, the initiative of publishing books in the region of Eastern Himalayas. So we have Anuradha Lekha from Siliguri, Sharda from Darjeeling, and Churen would have come from Kalimpong, and Rachana Publication from Gangtok. And the authors here, like a lot of the story writers of the blog, have deployed all different means, memories, to write their story about contemporary events or events of the immediate past. But this talk is a collaborative effort of Own the Past, which is run by Vihar. And we're very grateful to Mahanirvan Calcutta Research Group and Past Connect, all sharing, and I think we all share similar interests. The program will begin with, and we are very grateful to Professor Shubhash Ranjan Chakraborty, setting the tone. Shubhash Babu is a very well-known historian and a very highly respected teacher of history and a former president of Mohanirvan Calcutta Research Group, who spent years in Eastern Himalayas and Darjeeling and researching and reading and writing. The microphone will then be handed over to Dr. Porjan Hussain, a historian and anthropologist who has worked extensively and published on Himalayan Buddhism and traveling around the region. He will be in conversation with Lekha, Sharda, and Anuradha in any order that he wishes to. But before Shubhash Babu begins the discussion, we have a small ceremony of a book launch. Sharda Chetri's book, A Legacy of Sorrows, is being formally launched in Calcutta. It's been released earlier. And may I request Dr. Joypu Sengupta, Director, Alipur Museum, to do the honors, please.
But should I think I will come. No, come back. Go over to that side. Yes. Because otherwise I will, I.
But Sharda will be
I think we should all hold this together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I just have one copy. The printers, they did we had this coming late. So I think it's in, Fajana, what was the name of the bookstore? Pratiksha.
Pratikon College.
Exactly.
Prediction
So the book is available.
copies there and everybody's interested in, but it's also available on
Amazon, it's also available, right? So what is something called? What's a legacy of sorrow?
So can you just?
Yeah, just this one. A this slide. Slide is a legacy of sorrow. We take this. Legacy of.
Yeah.
Legacy of sorrow. Legacy of
So
sorrow.
if we talk about it, this one enjoy after the event, if I may take, a little bite of your comments on the event. Towards the end. Okay, thank you. Now I hand it over to Portable. It's all yours. What should I give it to Shubhai Babu? I think Shubhai first. After Shubhai.
Who gets the title?
I have to begin with a disclaimer. Mr. Shoes gave an expert comment. I'm not an expert on anything. It's not even the all I can share is some of my personal story about my involvement in Darjeeling. So I've written on Darjeeling one or two pieces on the history of the movement, formation of identity, etc. These are all secondary based on secondary research. I have done very little archival work. I cannot claim to be a historian of Darjeeling either. I owe a lot to my colleague, friend, and Nana, Raju, the late Professor Kumar Pradhan. He was a fascinating person and he was actually a wealth of knowledge. I will have to audition to refer to him. Tapti had asked me to talk to about for 5-6 minutes. So I just initiate a few subjects which I hope we'll be able to continue discussing when we exit the course. My experience of Darjeeling started at a time when finding a job only in Darjeeling, I felt bereft of being torn away from Calcutta as in tearing my umbilical cord. But when I left Darjeeling, the day after a football match, Mohbad had won the Ahmedabad trophy, centenary trophy by defeating its Bengal. So in a happy state of mind, I left Calcutta, felt very sorry to leave at an exciting time. When I visualized for myself a very important historical look, what would I do in Darjeeling? And anyway, I went to Darjeeling. The moment I arrived on 27 May 1968, 58 years ago, the fog and Maya of Darjeeling unveiled me all of a sudden, before I even realized. In the course of time, I found a second home. Darjeeling, with million personalities, lots of memories would come here, but I would just stick to one or two small stories. I found that it is very difficult to communicate with the majority of students. Particularly, I was put up in the hostel. To go to the toilet, I had to go to a student's room and then reach the toilet. Most of them were Nepali speaking, they don't really emphasize at all. It's very difficult to communicate with them because most of them did not know Bengali. I did not know Nepali yet, and my broken English would have done for us. So I decided that it is essential if I want to communicate with the students. You can't teach without communicating. You have to learn the language. And that landed in not in very different difficulties for me because I was a courageous guy. I after enough courage to speak Nepali wherever I could. I would see people smiling, silent, but I ignored it. But I had one funny incident one day, about 6 7 months after I joined. One day we were coming back from the government college. Again, I and Kuan Raju, my dada, we waited. Raju wanted a pan. Only if I wanted a cigarette or a pan. In the road of the convent road and cart road, there was a few tuck shops. He asked me, would you like a pan? I said, I told him, no, I go Kanlinda. Go Kanguinda. Very clearly enunciated. After that, we started walking towards the bazaar and into our homes. Suddenly, I found that a group of young girls, all in the uniform of St. Teresa's School, which was below the United Government, coming up and suddenly someone was asking, Roxy Khane? Kandoida. Roxy Khane? Kandoida. I didn't follow them. I asked Raju, what are they doing? They are trying to mimic him. So, actually, what I would say, Khaligan. It's like, Kami Khaiboda. To say loudly, go Khandonida instead of Khanda or Khadira. So it was, till the bazaar came, for about 10 minutes, they continued doing that. Sometimes, particularly looking back at me, I was came off at the beginning and then I started enjoying it. This was a very interesting incident that I thought I would tell it. Secondly, another related to the architecture. There was a builder's bag. Builders called ANZ builders or builder Lloyd's bag. Lloyd's bag. It had who was the turret was the British Crown. It simulated the British Crown. There was, around the early part of the first decade of the 20th century, both several imperial powers were in a very deep contest. And there was very soon there came up a talent with the white helmet of the Kaiser. That was after the Bethany School on the Gandhi Road, that is called the Gandhi Road now. It's fascinating. That house, we had gone regularly. I came to know about this later, and fascinating. So these are some of the things that we do not normally notice. But again, my source was Kumar Nandets. I could say another. I do not know whether I should say this, but my son grew up in Darjeeling for the last 5.5 years of his existence, and he went to school, nursery school. One day we found that he was dancing and laughing and shouting Bengali book, Bengali book, yes, Bengali book. We were also arguing funny and what are what are you saying? We all call me this. We all call me this. So I think this is time. By that time I had already spent more than about 8 years in Darjeeling. When we first went, majority of our Bengali colleagues were very solicited. They told them, be careful of the Lebanese, particularly the drugs. Little did they know that we would soon outdo many of them in both. So, these are some of the stories, some of the memories that stayed with me has stayed with me for such a long time. But I think I would just might like to mention a few things about Darjeeling. In 1968, Darjeeling seemed to be in a state of transition. Colonial hangovers were still there. There were some British who continued to exist in stay in Darjeeling. But the demand for autonomy, hill autonomy, for example, is something that was already there for quite some time. Someone talked about Scottish type of autonomy, hill autonomy. We didn't understand what that meant. Language movement was not very far in coming out. There was a language movement in 1961 which led ultimately to some violence and ultimately led to the recognition, official recognition of Nepali as the official language of the three Hills Reservations, Darjeeling, Kalimpong, and Kashmir. Now, it was, we were seeing this, but for my memory is that Darjeeling was still a very, very cosmopolitan town. You found communities, all communities represented. There were the Nepalese, of course, various sorts of Nepalese, the caste Hindus, tribal identities, ethnic identities, what Kuantan calls the Janjatis. But this was not really pronounced there. For example, if you ask the Lapche Lepcha, what is your caste? He will say Lapche. He almost, most of them did not know any Lepcha. At least in Darjeeling, the kind of lectures that I did. But they considered themselves as Nepalese. This was an inclusive identity that characterized the movements that look the cultural identity and the language. It was not everyone's language at all. But then you have almost every other communities. The Marwaris, the Bengali Marwaris were probably the earliest settlers there. The desert to the mountains is a long story. Someone had worked on that, and I think a paper was published in the Shipping Society journal way back in the early 90s, I guess. There were also a large number of Tibetans and Bhogias. Travel lectures were predominating in Kalimpong more than in Darjeeling. There were Bengali who were also very pretty old, and some of them were quite preeminent as well. I cannot name, I can give you names, but I don't think that's necessary. But I would mention one Bengali at least, Dilip Bosch. His house is the one which had the spiked helmet of the Kaiser. He described himself as the hero of the greatest bomb of the century. Nitin Bosch was his cousin, and he once cast him in the role of a hero in one of his films. It flopped totally. But he was the correspondent, special correspondent of the States of Canada. Wrote beautiful English. And his passion was theatre. He would always try to stay in the theatre, and he stayed several of them with us, the amateurs, as their in, you know, protagonists. There were Marwadis, I knew quite a bit of them. One was very friendly, senior to me, I call him Nathu Dada, Nathu Chacha, whose family has owns a lot of things, largely. There were still old Englishmen. There was one Colonel Marshall. Colonel Marshall was a retired colonel of the British Ghana Regiment, but he spoke impeccable Nepali, not only Nepali. He spoke most of the tribal language in equal facility. And the way he could recognize who was a Kuru, who was a lecturer, who was a Thapa, who was a Taman, who was a Rai, was amazing, absolutely amazing. Old man used to live in only mansions. I did not get to know him personally, but we all admired him from the distance. There was another lady who later became the secretary of the IBA, TBIBA, the Agriculture Indian Tea Association. In other words, the Planters Club. Mary, she was known as Mary Memsa. She spent her time in Kenya in the 1960s. The grapevine had it that her own personal accounts would say that she had eaten quite a few farmhouse alive almost. And that was an exaggeration perhaps. But Mary Memsa was, and Colonel Mazda, they were numbered from that. Another gentleman I must mention is Charlie Dar. Charlie Dar was wonderful. Charlie called himself he was a conservation in charge of the municipality. He said the decline of Darjeeling started the day I retired. He testified to that. It seems to be a very clean town. Charlie was seen everywhere. Charlie had also, he always carried a bed, small bed with him. Charlie was particularly present in all sporting events in the college sports. I wondered what he was doing in college sports, but they all income. I had one was in charge of the sports section. I had a very good relationship, very friendly relationship with all of them. Charlie was a wonderful person. And he is very funny, very, with a great sense of humor. Charlie was a Murray of Poundam School. He was the principal. His name was Prem Murray. Charlie always called him George. George, he was very friendly with him. I was asked Mr. Murray, why does he call you George? You're not George. He asked him, I'm not George. That's the kind of person Charlie was. Charlie's daughter, Noreen Dunn, is very well known. And this year, she was awarded a lifetime achievement by the Bengal School Awards of North, which was a very great occasion. Uh, so Darjeeling's cosmopolitanism, there was also a Jew. What is that? Maurice Sam was the reporter of the Himalayan Observer, a newspaper that used to be published by Vasily Department and still of the California College, California. Mr. Mari, I have also mentioned of the missionaries, Mother Damien. Everyone mentions her. She was a wonderful lady, but absolutely obsessed about the dear girls. She's always very obsessive. A teacher did not go and take one class even. She was Mother Damien was very upset. But Mother Damien was very kind and she would often supply me with the TLS. She watched the latest TLS come, you come and collect them. And I remember I was in Arts to also take a few classes, one for a month, guest teacher. She paid me for that. But then she also gave me a book. And she wrote Felix Kite Nelu Safety. Virgil. Happy is one who knows. I think that was one in my youthful arrogance thought that she acknowledged my knowledge. But I think it was a thing that you must try and learn as much as you can, because that will make you happy. There was Father Stanford. Father Stanford was an old man we will not be able to hear. I remember a very funny incident in the sports association meeting in Darjeeling. And someone was trying to say something about the need to get the citizens college, school, for a football tournament. He said, no, I'm not telling you how to run a football tournament, you tell me how to run the school. My friend Dibakar Vasu, professor of Gandhi Government College, he was trying to say something in his ear. And father leaving, say something to Dibakar here. Father leaving told Dibakar that don't try, he's dead. And Father Temple was talking, Dibakar was talking, and I told Father leaving, so is Dibakar. It was one all around part of the YouTube performance. And there are many others. Mr. Mare, of course, was a wonderful person, very friendly. I think we need to, when we talk of literature, I have a bit of honor for Ivy Lai. Hindu Madhura, I don't see him much mentioned. His books are not available very easily. Recently, some English translations have been found, and I understand that Adil Ramita Shah has been a Bengali translation too. Ivy Raju had in the English translation, the last line of his uh, introduction of his foreword. It seems possible to write only about the people you like. He said that when you write, you follow the people you know. It is possible to write only the people you like. I had the privilege of translating one of his pieces, Kosh Babu. Kosh Babu, that is an indication of the fact that he really knew this man, loved this man, but he was trying to be an impersonal judge. That made him very sad. He said, I have a copy of this. It came out in the newspaper. And another person is Kumar Pradhan. Kumar Pradhan's book the Gorkha conquest, consequences, processes and consequences, unification of Nepal, spiritual reference to Eastern Nepal. It is a handbook for understanding the origin of Dutch, the processes, the pulls and the pushes, etc. These are very important. And his Bengali book, sorry, Nepali book, Pailo Pohor, which was VCC Academy Award, if I'm not mistaken. He writes on the Janjati or Father Gangapusad Pradhan, who the first Nepali newspaper came out with it in Kalimpong at the beginning of the 20th century, Gorkha Khabar Kagat. He was a Padri. He was the first Padri of the Nepali expansion. And the third one was Darjeeling's own theatre. You know, Girish Ghosh, Vijay Roy, Amritalal Ghosh, Kriporay Ghosh, Kavish Kodha. Kodha has written that wonderful essay on the old theatre, and Darjeeling was a very theatre-loving area. There are lots of Kurdic theatre they do, everybody, right? They would be stayed. And I remember one that there was a very lately, I mean, Devrani. And finally, I would education said that the army and recruitment. I think that there should be something seriously discussed about Darjeeling sports. Because this is where many Nepalese have played a great role and a great role to play. And finally, I would talk about just a little about the army recruitment, the recruitment to the Gokha. This was one of the major pull factors when Nepal was in the process of advance. But we have here a book that is celebrating a very, very great man, Kanju Lama, came from a small village of Sikkim and shows us exemplary courage and sufferance that he was given the Victoria Cross. Aurora has demonstrated such empathy, such finesse, that it gives a very lasting imprint on it. Now, as opposed to this celebration of a life, which meant from be recruited, let home, got offered himself as a soldier, and made such a great. I mean, then the days of his life after retirement in developing peace and against violence. There's something very important. And I'm really happy to know that there's a museum for him there. But apart from that, there are, I would come to this point later. Yes, please. Then maybe I would like to recite something from translation, Bengali translation of two poems, but later. And I can sing, it may end with the Ivy lines, again Ivy lines, one, John, a real story, it's the English translation. John is a very famous story, small story written by him. And a complicated love affair where the boy and the girl involved, they have to lose their caste, they're going away. Where can they go? They all went to Mughal, the land of the Mughals. And this is how he aims this. A pair of men and a pair of women crossed the bridge and headed towards the land of the Mughals. Close at the hills of an army recruiter of the company, shepherded a line of running young recruits. This is something that we can come back later. So I think I haven't been able to tell much of a story, but an outline of the kind of thing that we can discuss in the course of this.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've taken a little more time.
No, sure.
So we start. What do you call yours?
Well, thank you, Subhash Babu, for your memories, for reminiscing on your days about your days in Darjeeling. So we have been discussing three very different kinds of books today, and they're related but very, very different. we're discussing Chidingabi Song of the Soil, which is a translation of the Nepali text Patsong. It's a lecture one, and I'll just come to that. We're also discussing Sharda Chetri's book, which she just launched today, A Legacy of Sorrow, and we're discussing Anuradha Sharma's Ganjulama. So there are three very different kinds of books, but all three of them have something in common. They tell you stories from the region. And it is very important to be able to discuss authors, voices and narrators from Darjeeling in Kolkata. I think it's this event is one of the ways of connecting the center and the periphery, if I may put it in so many terms. So let me um, start with Chidin Kabimo's book. It's really unfortunate we were looking forward to having him with us, but as Tapidi mentioned, he was caught up in SIR activities, and it's been going on that madness for quite a while now. So he's been caught up with that, and it's very unfortunate that he couldn't come here in person today. When I read the book, two things really stayed with me, remained with me. One was, and we'll be talking about this in some detail. One was, as Shubha mentioned, I.B. Rai. One was Chudin's use of a colloquial Nepali. The Nepali text is written in a very everyday Darjeeling in Nepali. And I think it's the choice of language is a very, very interesting one. And the other thing that stuck with me is also the title itself. Patsum is a lecture word. It's as is written in the blurb of the Nepali text, which means basically Matapudi, Song of the Soil, and that's how it's translated into English. So how a lecture word then begins to talk about the aspirations of a people and of their inspiration for self-determination and for a separate homeland called Gorkhaland. So we'll begin with Anuradha Sharma. Anuradha, if you can discuss Chidin Kabimo's text for us. So thank you.
Shouldn't put me in this spot. I didn't sign up for it. So Shouldn't couldn't make it because he had his job and he couldn't yank himself off. So speaking of his book, I speak as a reader and someone who read his book also critically because I did an essay on writings on Burkhalad. So what I found, children's this book is really important in the sense that it, as far as its literary merit is concerned, it starts the novel again. For a long time, the Nepali novel was not there because I think last was Indra Bahadur Rai, and Bahadur Rai's novels, and there's this huge lull, and it was more, I think, literature had veered towards poetry. So he very consciously, he first, I think, he wrote 1986 collection of short stories, in which this title story, 1986, was on Gurkha movement. And then he wrote Fatsun, and Fatsun is very important also because it breaks the silence on Gurkha agitation. Because if we, know about what happened is after the violent agitation of, in the late 80s, we had a period of liberation. In that sense, the Supremo was pretty. He wouldn't take. There was no space for critical voices. So, which is why I think nobody really spoke of Gorkhaland. There was also a silence on Gorkhaland, and there was one narrative that everybody had to, agree with me, right? Yeah, there was this narrative that everybody had to kind of subscribe to. So his novel kind of takes a very traditional take on both. So until that time, I think there was no writings based on Burhan, and so that is where he comes in, and also he, I mean, there is because of all this, because of this, and then of course, as you said, that he writes with, it's a coming of age story. It's a coming. So what happens, like, when you talk about movement, when you talk about conflict, usually you talk about the big things. You talk about aspirations. So this is a story that really starts at the bottom, at the grassroots. It starts with young school dropouts and how they become participants in the movement without even really knowing what it is about. And actually, and that really helps us understand the violence of the 1980s because much of the violence, it actually turned mindless.
So we kind of grew up with one. Of course, we spoke about the violence that the state committed. The state sponsored violence is something that we spoke about, but we did not speak about the violence that the community perpetrated on each other. We did not speak about violence that happened. And it was, and like for me also personally, it was eye opening because then I started saying that, okay, wow, this really happened. This really happened. People were doing this to each other. And it was, so there were these very hard very unnuanced take of on Golkhanan, but I think he brings in a very fresh look at it, very from the bottom, from the grassroots, story told by young boys and who were just not interested in studies and they just got thrown out or they just, left. And then suddenly they find themselves in the thick of things and they are in this theater of conflict and doing things that was unimaginable, right? And I think that it's a great, great, very important text because after that, it kind of really. Also, we must keep in mind that the politics of Darjeeling changed because in 20 said I think by 2007, Swati Singh was already on his way out, and there was this new dispensation that came. So there was more plurality in terms of politics. And because of that, I think also, and it's a coincidence that his book comes after that. And I mean, 86 and his came much later, I think 2017, I think he wrote. So I think because of this coincidence also with the breakdown of the very hardened political structure, so a lot of voices came up. Now people are actually writing about it. Shardadi is one. There is Pulange, which is translated into Seeds of Vanity by, that Pulange is written by Leknath Chetri. And there's one memoir, which is a non-fiction by Babita Madan. And you'll find plenty of writings. And suddenly now I think what now people are able to talk about it and also have a very nuanced views on it. Thank you.
Really, I just want to also kind of, and we were just having this conversation with Julian over phone. It's very interesting how one of the kind of the protagonist, one of the protagonists of the novel is a Muslim guy. And we don't often find the stories of Muslims represented. We are talking about the Nepali, the Bhutia, the Lepcha, and the becoming sort of the Lapche Bote Nepali, Hami Sabai Godhan. So that's, and but here you have a Muslim guy who is equally participating, who is he's the narrator of the story, and he's also, I mean, I think for him, friendship is the main he bond with his compatriots, with his group, and then do you and we were just talking about this. Do you think this was a conscious choice on his part to represent?
Asked him, and he actually during the course of research he came across a Muslim character, and then he thought to himself is why are the minorities, be it linguistic or religious, not represented in the whole Gorkha discourse. And that is why he then, because it's there, and then he consciously put him in the story. And also, if I be, add to it, because I think his books, for example, he speaks about the lectures. And therein also there was he was courageous enough to do that because I think this idea of unity or united voice often also erases some, the identities like so the Janjati identities because you are subscribing to one unified identity, right? So when he spoke of lectures, there was also okay, lecture matter gareko. I mean, Nepali होइन लेप्चाहरू नेपाली होइन लेप्चाज are not Nepali. So there is like why is he speaking of only the lecture? So I think that was also very important, very courageous of him to do to speak of not picking characters which subscribe to the dominant narrative, which is I mean decided by maybe the upper caste Nepalis in like elsewhere, like anywhere. So there is this literature. There is one thing, and also how you think of Gorkha land. This is how you think of Gorkha land. How you think of this. Like there is one thing. So in that way, I think he is like if you read his book, he will not come. He will not be giving a lot of lectures there. Or this is why. But spoken about very small everyday things, right? So in that way also I think that is quite a courageous take on the movement and and I think his choice of a Muslim character also comes from that. Yes.
Thank you. And as we were speaking to him, I was asking, yeah, yeah, of course, please go ahead.
I think it's very important that for the yeah. And you know who is the chief? Nobody knows. Chiefs change. But the word term chief, I know, strange that we in 1986 onwards, I was not in that. They heard from friends. Everyone was going up to the chief, or the supreme.
Supreme.
And one person, couple of persons we don't. Madan Tawal, for example,
He died of
at a very horrible cost. Okay, totally clear. Kumar Pradhan, I called him and he died at home. He had to leave Darjeeling after Kashyap's conservatorship was over and migrate to Srinagar. Right? There is atmosphere of fear which continued even after what the poetry makes us very clearly. Why is Gorkha land? They're happy with the council. The agreement was coming to the end of the story. But when the council came, when the council ended, I wrote about 2004 it was published. I call it Silence Under the strange story of democracy in Darjeeling. No one, I was doing some research on this. I had asked a friend who's a broker. After retirement, he was with the council. I told him, why don't you have a kind of booklet saying what they've been achieved? He said, I had gone to the chief with the proposal. He said, Kola the country. Who do you want to shoot? So that is a kind of, and there was the atmosphere there. And that is, I think we got it clearly. Absolutely no.
Um, uh, Thank you, Shivash Babu. I think one of the things which emerges from Judith Kalimu's novel is this whole notion that the Golkhaland identity is not a homogeneous identity at all. And that comes through very strongly in the novel, where he himself talks about his own location as an author or his own identity as an author as one being multi-layered. You know, it's intersected by lecture ethnicity. It's intersected by the fact that he speaks Nepali. So all of these are coming together and forming a very multifaceted notion of identity, where ethnicity and identity also collapse, or in many ways one is informed by the other and vice versa. So I think that's one of the remarkable points of this book, is he's able through his characters to weave together these different strands of identity and not have a very homogeneous notion of identity at all. So I find that very, very remarkable about this book. Let me come to the second author we're discussing today, Sharda Chetri. And yours is once again a very powerful narrative and a very different kind of a narrative because it takes us through both agitations, if I may. 86, and it also takes us through 2070. And you're doing it primarily through women. I found that very interesting because often when we're talking about movements, or we're talking about, movements for self-determination, whether we term these as agitation is a very state term. I don't like using it. We may just call it revolution, for instance. Often the stories of women are the ones that get ignored. So it's very interesting that you then choose to narrate your story across timelines, also across spaces, because there's this character who comes in from Australia trying to go back to her roots. So would you like to share with us something about your journey as an author and your choice of the women protagonists in the novel?
Thank you, Prajanya. Uh, I worked as a journalist for a newspaper, and I was posted in Darjeeling in 97, 96, 97. At that time, Gishing was already in his throat. He was already there. But it so happened that in 1986, I had just joined class 11. That was government college. In college, we had class 11 and 12 at the time, though we don't have it now. So in 1986, I had just joined for whatever reason. I don't know. I'm from Siliguri. I'm a girl from Siliguri. When I was sent to government college, I completed my ICSE, and in 1986, I was in class 12. And there the agitation started. I had no idea what was happening. But I got direct first-hand written view account of what was happening in the agitation of 1986, primarily from my friends, my friends' families. I was staying in a hostel at the time, and these girls and boys, they would come to school, they would come to college and they would narrate what was happening at home. And it was frightening. It was the first time I was staying away from home, and it was just frightening. I didn't know what was happening. Later on, in the hostel, and it's a fact. In the hostel where I was staying, we had CRP raids, actual raids inside the hostel. And at one point of time, I even fainted. Like looking at the atrocities of the CRP people, I even fainted. It was so bad. And we had this, life became like, well, we had 40 days strike. Can you imagine? During that time, we had a strike which continued 40 days. So I had a first hand experience of what was happening. But then that time I was just a student. And then after I moved out, then later on when I came back, got married and I came back to Darjeeling, 2017 happened again. Like it was something, it was a bad dream which was happening all over again. People dying. And during that agitation 1986, Virginia, my friends, they were staying in the jungles. Literally, they were staying in the jungle. The boys, they were staying in the jungles. And the girls, they were so frightened to go back home. They would prefer staying back in college, even during, when it's getting dark. And then we had to tell them, come and stay in our hostel. We were providing them space in our hostel. Please come and stay in our hostel because they were frightened to go back home, girls, young girls, because the raids were happening everywhere. So it was in this kind of situation, and that thing has stayed with me for very long. And I wanted to write from the film because there are stories from the male perspective, from the men's perspective. And so I thought, why not about the females? Well, because the women were equally involved in the agitation. They were equally, in fact, more than equally involved because they were looking after the men folk, they were out in the jungles. They were living in the jungles, they were out, they were active participants because it was the women who were facing the brunt in the house. Raids were being done by the CRPF, and they were the ones who actually faced it in the literal sense. So I thought, why not from their perspective? And this story, most of the characters in my book, most of them are people I know. Some people like through I know through somebody else. People I know through someone. So these are real life characters, and there are characters from Nepal. And like Sir said, he said that Darjeeling is a very cosmopolitan space. Okay, there is space for Biharis, there's space for Marwaris, Bengalis, there's space for everyone. And in fact, like I have friends who call themselves Gorkha Goans. They are Goans, Mr. Tino. Mr. Yeah, they call themselves Gorkha Goans because they are not Gorkha, but then they are Gorkha. And they are Gorkha Marwaris. Okay. And they are Gorkha Nepalis. In fact, there are Bengalis. Like Bengali and Nepali mixed Bengals. It's a nice mix of people. And we've been living in harmony for a long time. And in one of the lines, I think Subhash Singh has mentioned that we are not fighting against Bengalis. We are friends. We are fighting against Bengal. I think I've mentioned the line in the book. The line is there. He said that from the ramparts of that Sumeru Punch, the famous space for giving bhashans in Darjeeling. He said from there. So I think all this together and my memories of those days which I've spent in my hostel, memories of the days of 2017 where there was no internet, I was cut off from the entire country. The Darjeeling was cut off, and then people died during the 1986. I think the agitation carried on for 22 months, which left 1,200 people dead. That's the official figure. Could be, I think, at least twice as much. So these were things which we heard and which we saw. So these are things which I've tried to put into perspective, like posterity, so that people can go back to it again and again. That's it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Harvey. It's actually a fascinating text, and I was also reminded of the scholar Deepti Tamam and her book. She writes about her book is called. Just give me can you note it down somewhere? Yeah, I'll give you the name later. It's just I think it came out 2 years ago, and her argument is that the construction of ethnicity during the Golkhalan agitation is itself kind of gendered. And it's very interesting how when I relate that to your stories, kind of makes sense, like someone who is an ethnographer and who is collecting stories and your fictional account of some of these people. And I'm reminded of how you that the letter, the mother's letter in your book. And also, I think Sumitra, the moment she's dying, she's thinking of her mother who also died. So I think there is a certain way in which you're foregrounding suffering, the legacy of death, the legacy of dying, the continued legacy, and you're doing it through the women characters. I think that is a brilliant and fascinating take on the whole movement. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Majalya. Uh, I read, I mean, it's a research study which says that the trauma which we carry, we carry it from our grandmothers. The trauma can be carried for as many as fifth generation because we've done this experiment in Emory University and we've proved that you still carry your great grandmother's trauma. You don't realize it, and people who've gone through Holocaust, their great grandchildren, they carry the trauma. Even if they haven't read about the Holocaust, they still carry it. So I have tried to tie up. I don't know how far I'm justified in doing that, but I guess this trauma which we feel, the kind of helplessness of sorrow. Sorrow is something. Why I've written sorrow the title? Because sorrow, I think it goes beyond grief. It goes beyond suffering, and sorrow is something I think which comes with history. So it's a burden, I guess. It's a burden also. So it's something which we have carried to generation, and I've tried to tie up 1986 and 2017. That's why I see it as a bridge. That's why I call it a legacy. Beyond that, beyond 1986, because as I read and what I know is this self-autonomy or whatever you call it, this has been going on for since 1905. Since the Hillmen's Association, they first demanded a separate entity of their own. So this has been almost for a century and a quarter now, and it's become like a legacy. Like it's something which we are born with and which we carry. So that's why I've given the title "A Legacy of Sorrow." I guess it explains why, I try to find a connection between 1886 and 2017, and maybe not beyond that also. I don't know. It could happen. So that's why I'm like.
Thank you. I found the name of the book. It's Gender Identity and Conflict and Theorizing Gender Peace and Security in the Eastern Himalayan Borderlands. So it's in Bristol University Press. So she teaches, I think, I think she was in GC before. Now she's gone to Bedong College.
Right, right.
Dipti Tamagak. Yeah.
She's a very good speaker, right?
Very well. So one of the which I really liked is your idea of intergenerational trauma as cutting through something, because trauma is cutting through generations and also as cutting through these two very important moments. One is the 1986 Chiasiko Andolan and the other is the 2017 agitation. I also liked the fact in your book how you bring in a lot of intertextual references to other histories, other kinds of trauma. And do you think, and this is just sort of, I'm thinking out aloud as I'm asking this question because I'm also thinking of one of my colleagues. I don't want to name her here, who is from Manipur and whose father was shot down by the by the army there. So there are borderland regions in the country, and Darjeeling is of course one of them, deeply contested in their histories. One can think of Manipur, one can think of Kashmir. So do you also see trauma as kind of connecting women from these different borderland regions and somehow do you think that there can be
Yeah, absolutely. I think trauma is something like each one of us, we process trauma differently, I guess. And women do it differently, I think. They see in a wider context. And in this context, I'll speak, I don't know about the Manipuris, I won't speak on them, but I like to speak about this Darjeeling space, the space in Darjeeling. See, we are Nepalis, okay? We speak the language Nepali, and the language binds all of us together. There are ethnic groups, Lakche, Tamang, Bhotia, Lepcha, whatever, but there is something which binds us together, which is Nepali. And a Lakche speaks Nepali at home, a Tamang speaks Nepali at home. They have different sub entities, but we are like language binds us together. Now, Nepal is also another country. So we are negotiating a space in which ethnically we are Nepalis, like from a different country, but nationally we are Indians. So it's a very tricky space, to be in. So I think that's one of the reasons why people are advocating for a special identity, because the space where we are in, and we get judged all the time. We are getting judged all the time because it's a very narrow space. We have an ethnic space of being a Nepali. We are like, okay, fine, you can't deny that. And we are Indians first and foremost. Our national identity is Indian. So sometimes it becomes difficult to negotiate that identity.
If I may just
Sure, sure.
in Murali said, even in the foreign language, in a huge meeting, I was present there, the whole union is being ground. He said, हम लोग रोहित नहीं गए, हमें नहीं नॉलेज नहीं मिले.
Exactly. Yeah, Subhash.
That was
Thank you.
like guy.
Thank you, sir. In this context, I'll add something. See, what happened was, let me go back into history now. A little bit of history from what I know. With your permission, sir. Uh, Rajni was part of Sikkim. Okay. And for a very long time. So in 1700s, late 1700s, what happened was, sorry, somebody was just coming. Let me say someone. Okay, okay. In 1774, around that time, the red part of the fact, so 1700, this Gorkha came. At that time, Nepal was a very small country. It just in between this river, not even Tista, it hadn't gone beyond Tista. So in 1774, 75, that part of the century, what happened? The Gorkha king under the Shah dynasty, they started expanding eastward and westward. Eastward, it went right up to Sikkim. Okay, it went right up to Sikkim. So in 1800, it has reached Sikkim. It had conquered Rabdanse. That time the capital of Sikkim was, Sikkim was a different country, kingdom, sorry. It was a different kingdom. The Gorkha king, he captured almost half of Sikkim. Rabdanse, the capital, was captured. And westward, he was in a major expansionist mood. So he captured over here, he went across Himachal till Satluj. Till the Satluj River, the Gorkha king, he went. After that, what happened? This Sikkim Raja, the Chogyar, he approached the British to liberate him from the Nepal rule. So they had the first Anglo-Nepal war in 1814 and 15, 1814, 15, where Nepal was forced to cede land on the western side and on the eastern side. The Sikkim, they had to give back Sikkim to Sikkim. They lost almost one third of the land was lost in that process. So again, Nepal became a smaller state. So in the meantime, Sikkim was very helpful, very grateful to the British. But one day, what happened in 1835? Two Captain Lloyd and Campbell, they were camping in old Gorkha station somewhere near Gu. So they liked this place so much. They were so much enchanted by this place, Darjeeling, that they requested the Chogyal to give them this place again to the British India. So that was how in 1835 it came back to the British again. So it had been a part of Sikkim, it had been a part of Nepal. For Nepal, it was part of Nepal for almost 40 years. And before that, it was part of Sikkim. So that was how it came. And even now, like people talk about Sikkim and Nepal, the merger of Sikkim and Darjeeling, sorry, Sikkim and Darjeeling. It's based on this premise because Darjeeling was originally of Sikkim. Of course, Sikkim had none of it, but still, some people, they still think about it as an option. Okay.
Thank you so much. And Subhash Babu was just mentioning IVRI. I think one of the things which is being discussed here, and which something that IVRI talks about, and I was also telling Anuradha this, that in Nepal now there has been a critique of Nepali as a khas bhasa, Bahunko bhasa, but I think IVRI makes it a very strong point to say that in Darjeeling this is tea garden language. It is the language of a common speech to define their identity against Mughal, against the land which is below. So I think that is something that is very, very important and crucial to highlight.
I can specific comment of this because I'm not that well conversant with the other languages. But Agriculture made a conscious effort using largely tribal languages and large bit of these words in his Nepali narrative that he writes. I read some of his, read Ali Ravita Shah. I read his something. People Katipa is a book that was published by Shah Brothers. I tried my best to get a copy. And I talked to the owner and he had to give me one. So obviously, yes, he did consciously do that. That's why he's not very easy to translate. Also, why I translated Guru because I thought it was the easiest to translate.
And something else that you mentioned, which is really very interesting, is how kind of we have the British to blame for a lot of things. Actually, redrawing boundaries, redrawing, bringing people from here and there, messing up geographies, and again, Manipur comes in, Kashmir comes in. So yes, let me move to Anuradha's book, which is a very sort of different book, a very interesting book because it talks about a figure from Sikkim, Gyatso, who becomes like Ganju Lama. So he's a Lachumpa, I think. He's a
Chandra.
Shankar. Yeah. So he's born in this village in near Radense.
Ram.
Ravangla, yes. And from there he's recruited by he runs away from home and he finds himself in Kum, which is once again a very interesting place at that point of time because it's also a coming together of it's also a den of spies. This is something which I kind of looked at when I was in California and also Kum in the British time, when it's sort of, you have lamas who are also acting as spies for the British. So he's recruited from there and he becomes part of the army, he goes, fights the war, he's posted in Manipur, and then eventually gets the Victoria Cross and he goes back home. And you write it as a children's narrative primarily. So would you like to tell us something about, why you chose this medium of expression with so much illustrations? Was it because you wanted, children or the younger generation to kind of look at their own figures or their heroes and to sort of be able to relate to these stories?
Criminalism. She's the one. She's Lekha, and she wanted to get into publishing. To speak of how it started, and then we were talking about what to produce. And then I've got two daughters, and I always I tried to find literature from our region. We found nothing. So it was always from outside, from and mostly English and also Western. So why don't we have something? And Bangla is this huge. And thankfully I married a Bengali thing. I thought with the Bengali Baba they'll learn a lot of Bangla Shakto and Shishu Shakto and all that. So that but Nepali Dike, and from that side there's nothing. And our region completely there's nothing. So there was this. I wish there was something that I would. So first, then when Lekha said that, what should we do about it? Because she was selling books, she has a bookstore, and then said, Lekha, I think this is what we should do. You've got twins like same age as my daughters, and you've got there's plenty of other kids who need to read about. They need to be told stories from our place because there are none. And so why don't we? And I thought I'm partial to nonfiction, right? Because I'm a journalist and I'm trained in writing nonfiction. And I thought we children can like nonfiction too. And that idea came from my daughter because my elder one, she wants real stories. So for her, this story, she knows that it actually happened, that makes it more interesting for her. So, and nonfiction is real stories. She's also into fantasies and other things. And then she said that, okay, now real story. Then I thought, why don't we do real stories? And real stories can be fascinating. And Gandhi story particularly is very, very unreal like, very heroic, very dramatic. And we picked Gaju Lama, and also because Gaju Lama's son was my colleague at Telegram, and I got to know about him, and I had access to his, stories, so to speak. So then we thought, and his story was fascinating. And Ganju Lama, see what happens. Like this is a story based in Sikkim, and in Sikkim, Ganju Lama is a very well-known name because there are streets on his name. There's a Ganju Lama Dwar, but also he's not really well-known. Like he's more like this. Oh, he went to the army, he got victorious. So he's BC Saab. Everybody knows about him. And he was a great, and somebody could even say, oh, he's a great freedom fighter and all that and all that. But he was a professional soldier, right? And simply doing your job is also great, right? Right. So in fact, so that's what I try to, without making it sound like anything else, just being there and doing your job. And I think that's what I wanted to tell, and to the children particularly, what I wanted to speak about. Because when you speak about good cause, you speak about the bravery. And when you speak about the Nepalis, you kind of restrict their identity to the bravery identity. The Gorkha, they are warriors. And that's also a problem with a lot of people, because it's not the martial identity is not just that one identity. So, and also to the children, I wanted to say that being brave, anybody can be brave. You don't have to be a Gurkha to be brave. And this guy wasn't a Gurkha, so to speak, right? He's known as, if you go to the museum and there is this Sham Manik Shah's apocryphal, and I don't think he actually, because I tried to look for the source, where did Sham Manik Shah actually say this line that if you say you are, what's that? Like if you say that you are not brave, you are lying. And this was used by the Hindi movie also. Gurkha will never be afraid, and if you are afraid, then then either you are not a Gurkha or you're lying, something like that. So I find it, so I did use it in my book, because I tried to keep it to facts, and I could. So where did Shyam Malik Shah say this? Which speech did he say it in the cantonment? Whatever. But whatever was said and done, this is there in the museum, and so it is. So even in the museum, I found that there's one like clutching into that Gurkha identity, the larger identity of Gurkha being brave. But also the real story here is he's not ethnically a Gurkha, and he becomes a Gurkha, and then he gets, and he's recognized as the greatest Gurkha warrior in India. This is the only Gurkha warrior to get the Victoria Cross. It's not easy to get Victoria Cross, from what I gathered. I didn't know much about the army, but when I started researching, and then so the story was fascinating, and I thought, of course, the tricky part was writing about a war hero for children, because I wouldn't. I'm not. I don't want kids to think that war is good and we should be warriors and all that. But thankfully, this Gaju Lama was more than just that. He came and he advocated peace, and he spoke against war, and he never ever wanted war again, and he would say that we shouldn't have to fight this. So that made it easier, and I tried to that part, like tell the children that no, we don't war, and he came back and contributed in education, in upliftment of the society. So that made it easy. So I think that's that part, which is, I think, I find this character very fascinating, and that's why I wrote about him.
I also found it interesting how he remained a Buddhist for he's born into a I think Buddhist family as
Yeah.
kids. So and then there's the people cannot understand the name. The person who is writing down the name cannot understand and he thinks it's Kanju.
Yeah.
And then his father is trying to look for him. No one can find where he is. I found that very interesting. So to
Yes.
So I think Peter Greasy.
Yes, that's right. So what happens is Ganju Lama, he was Gatso Shangarpa. So he ran away from home. Baba Gokuni Khan just palliated. And then he didn't want to face his father, and then he ran, and then he went and met a gun. Those agents that the British had, Gujranwalas, those, yeah. So they and then Gallawalas, and there he lands in Ghoom. Ghoom is where they recruited. So Lama is a surname, and until there are several Nepali ethnicities which at various times they were recognized by the British as martial. So I think Lama, before that, like Thape Thape হয়েছে, right? And earlier there were some communities who could call. So not everybody who is a Nepali could become a Gorkha soldier, right? So in order to enter a Gorkha regiment also, so a Lama was one of the surnames. So then he chose to become a Lama, so that he's taken in. And because the war was on, and British, the army, they needed a constant supply of young people and anybody who looked like Gurkha, Churchill, and all that. So, and on credit, he was also underage. But Sheta, of course, because they were fantastic. I mean, the record he is like 18, but if you go Sikkim Nation, oh, he was 17 when he was in the war and he was a hero and all that. So even with his age, I don't know, that part I'm not sure, but he was underage. But so at 18, he ran away, and then he told this British clerk that Yakso Lama maybe, but the clerk heard Ganju and he was recorded as Ganju Lama. And apparently, when he was recruited and they called him, and he wouldn't respond to Ganju Lama for quite, it took some time getting used to. But what's fascinating, see, he ran away, and his father had no clue that this guy went and became a hero. And what happened in the war, like after the last, like when there was this combat, and then there's this heroic thing where he gets injured and then he's removed and he's taken from one place to another, and in this entire treatment, and in the end he's in Lucknow. He's kind of lost, but he's untraceable. So, and he's already in the meantime, he's already declared he's got the VC medal. And of course, then they try to find him, and the army guys go to his home in Sikkim and say Ganju Lama. And his father says, I have no son called Ganju, and sends him away. And then they thought that maybe this village called Sangmu is in Nepal. So they went to Nepal, but of course, Nepal, so there is no Sangmu. So they came back. They went to Bhum Depot and then found him. And then the father suddenly realized, oh, my son is now getting these lyrics for hero. So yeah, so that is the fascinating story of Gatso Sangam Babu Babu Babu.
What I found very interesting, and you rightfully mentioned, is I think there is also this need to move towards a critique of this whole construction of Gorkha identity vis-a-vis only a military identity.
Yes.
So much more. And so I think that you mentioned that, like, as a Sikkimese person who is coming in and becoming this figure, I think.
Exactly, and also what it felt was whenever when they spoke of Ganju Lama, it was almost, and this also as writing for children, like I thought I will write Ganju Lama for younger kids, for 5 years old, and then when I tried, I gave up. I made it for more than 10. Is so layered and so complicated because how can you tell a kid that he lied about his identity? Right. So it was not, and how could you even there could be a hero who lies, right? So then it suddenly occurred to me, what? That is system in place for British. Why the onus of that is on him, right? So I have suddenly it flipped. Suddenly even my way of thinking about it flipped, and I keep telling these people, like in fact, Ganju Lama, about him, somebody said, oh, he's an imposter. I think one of the historians, Shiruri, said he's an imposter, he's pretending to be a Gurkha. And then somebody said, oh, he took him the Lama identity just so that he could be in the army. But the point is, he didn't want to just so be in the army. Like, they knew, and the British, they exactly knew what they were doing. They just looked the other way when so they are the ones who, they made this idea of martial identity, and they only said that era martial, and they are not. And then you have this young boy there, and then obviously they knew that what they were doing, right? So of course, then I had to write that part in such a way that there was this war going on, and they needed this, and therefore they had it. So I really didn't want to talk about Ganju Lama as a quote unquote lie or somebody who misrepresented facts for his own gain, right? So he was trying to make the best of the situation that was presented to him at the time. Right? If that is the way I take it, so be it. And he was an explorer at heart. He wanted to explore the larger world, and that was the way when he took it. Right? Yeah.
He was in many ways agitated, like many others.
Hmm.
And like it was so kind to him. He became a hero.
Right.
And there was no question of his life. Because the British could constructed the Gurkha identity from the beginning.
Exactly.
During the Nepal War, Stalin was clearly showed that the British constructed the great Gurkha warrior, quote unquote, identity from the Nepal War. And that's why they set up the Gurkha recruiting depots. They did recruiting agents, and Hamid Andar talks about in his Katha, in his story. And the Balkanis came to the end of the century. They included many others, and the story of Balkanis is all for imperial interest, nothing to do with the remedy of the people concerned. Because until this time, we see how sad the life of many of these recruiters been.
That's right.
So now I'm going to move to Lekha, and I'm going to I'll be asking you because I think it's very important for us to talk about this whole idea of the regional publishing house, because it's important for a lot of authors who are from the region to get a space to articulate to tell their stories, to articulate their thoughts. So will you tell us something a bit about your journey as how you came into this, how you decided and why you decided to be publishing books?
So much. Before I talk about my publishing journey, I would just like to share a bit about how I started initially as a bookseller, and I've been running this independent bookstore called Cafe the Twins for the past 6 years, and I just recently ventured into publishing. So, yeah, debut book. So, Ganjulama is our maiden book. So, publishing is my newfound, I think, identity. This publisher, that as a publisher, this is just a newfound identity, very recent. So, I started my journey as a bookseller, and it's through the book cafe we have been, because you're talking about keeping the stories alive and giving a voice to writers from the region, giving a space to writers from the region. So I just would start by telling the journey of my book cafe first. Okay. So there, like, we have been for the past 6 years, we've been organizing a lot of. We don't only sell books, but we've been organizing a lot of literary events like meet the author sessions and book launches and open mics, just trying to promote local writers from the region. And one of our flagship event of our book cafe is Foothill Notes. It's an annual literary meet which we have been organizing for the past 4 years. And Anuradha is also part of the team. So we usually call writers from the Northeast uh, and to come and interact with writers from our region. And I just want to mention some of the names that who have come for that annual meet of us, like Eastern Kiri was a part of it, Robin Yam, Mama Dai. So these are a few names who were a part of our annual literary meet. And so that is something we've been doing. And next, I would also want to mention here about my second role, like role of a bookseller, and then my role as a storyteller. So I am a certified storyteller, and I've been running this story space called Kathagar, nurturing the young through stories and beyond. And since Past Connect is also about keeping the tradition of storytelling alive, so I would like to mention a bit about and tell you all a bit about Kathagars also. So what we do in Kathagar is like we conduct storytelling sessions for kids. So I perform stories in front of the kids, and after that, usually it's theme based. So we take a particular theme, like maybe about because I've been telling stories to kids about body boundaries and all. I go around to schools and I tell them about consent, body boundaries, and all. So we take a particular theme, and around that theme, I tell a story, and then we do activities around those themes. And we also do art and maybe some art activities, painting activities around those. And yeah, even Anuradha, these children, they are our regular participants, and she's been very supportive in promoting Kathagar also. And yeah, and now coming to my role as a publisher, it's just been 5 months that I stepped into the world of publishing. And the reason why we started this, one of our, what do you say, it was born out of the need to, amplify diverse voices from the region, underrepresented voices, unheard stories, lesser known stories. So that is one of our major focus. And it all began around 2003, I think so, when I first shared my 2023, sorry, when I first shared about this idea of starting a publishing house. And to some of my very close friends, and they are also a part of the team. So we have our website, so you can get to know if you just um, go to our site, and then you'll get to know more about our team. So I told this to my team. I think I will call them my uh, sisters or my friends before I call them a team. So Anuradha Didi is there, one of them, and even Sujata Di, she's there. She's sitting right there at the back, so she's there, and some of my other very close friends. And I told them that I want to start this publishing house, and how do you like the idea? And they said, yes, we really like the idea, and would you want to be a part of my dream of starting a publishing house? And they said, yes, we would really want to be a part of it. And then after that, we started having a lot of discussions around what do we start with? What do we start with? And then as Anuradha Di just mentioned that she told us that there is a dearth of children's literature from our region. So why don't we start with writing books for children? And then we started, okay, let us start with a biography series. And Ranjalama is the first book, and there are other biographies also, which yeah, and Ibirai, because Ibirai has been mentioned a lot during the course of the discussion. So Ibirai is one personality who we are working on. Yeah, the other biography is of Parijat. So Ranjalama is the first book, and there are other upcoming biographies also which we are working on, which are in the pipeline, and we are working on it. And I would like, I just want to specifically mention here that why did we begin with children's stories? And as Radha mentioned that there is a gap, there is a dearth of children's literature from our region, and uh, it it's very important to to have kids reflected, as in like if you don't see yourself reflected in stories, if you don't see a mirror of yourself in the larger world, it would it really affects their sense of identity, their sense of belonging. So I think that one of the main focus of Foothills Publishing would be to bring our children closer to stories from their region, to give them a glimpse into the you know life of the lesser known heroes of the region. So I think that is one of the aims that also Foothills Publishing as a publishing house is striving towards.
Thank you so much, Rekha. I'm also thinking of, like it's important, as I mentioned, to have publishing houses in the region. And I'm also thinking of Raman's Rachna Books, for instance, which has been doing very, very good work for some time now, in the sense that they do not just fiction, but they have also been publishing a lot of non-fiction, important academic books as well. They recently published a book by Alex Mackay, who's a very, very well-known historian of British colonial history of Darjeeling and Sikkim. So it's important to have, I think, these houses which not only give voice to authors from the region, but also talk about the history, also talk about different forms of culture, the ethnicities, languages of the region. So it's a very, very good initiative, and thank you so much.
So I think it's already
Translation also, yeah.
nothing. Nothing we go to do that they go to nothing. But, and I'm so excited in old age. So much is happening. I know nothing, I only ignorance about. I just got a couple of books to get some more. It is so exciting. Just get it up.
Yes, before I like, I just want to tell you about a lot of local public. So, mayor, apart from his public, like, he's the only one. Yeah, so there is Rajna Books. I think you've heard about Rajna Books, but apart from Rajna Books, we have some women publishing, which focuses on regional literature. I think they published Paksu in Nepali. And then we have Hamlo Kitab also, and then we have Wondershare Filmora. So yeah, there are many local publishers also are coming up with stories from the region, and this is how they are trying to keep alive the publishing. Seems it's very interesting. And this is how they are trying to ecosystem, a very vibrant ecosystem. Right now, there's one city we have so in this context, I would like to mention, hello, is, can you hear me?
Yes, teacher.
Okay. I've managed to collect 30 plus 25 stories, Nepali stories, which I've translated into English. The book is titled Colors of Kanchenjunga, Volume 1 and Volume 2, which I did, I think, couple of years ago. The last one was last year during the Lit Fest. During Lekha's Lit Fest, we released that book, Colors of Kanchenjunga, Volume 2. It has got 25 stories, Nepali stories, which have been translated into English. And the previous earlier volume was Colors of Kanchenjunga, Volume 1. And both of them published from B Books, Calcutta. And I do have copies here, you can get it online. Thank you. I have trust exactly. Yeah, thank you so much.
I thank all the panelists, and we would now like to open the panel up to questions for the audience. Yeah, sorry.
Just one thing. One is contrast, begin, and then the other counterpoint. I don't want to come away with a opposition from the poets. And Darcy line. Again, I go back to my son in these very young days. Visu London ma, Hamlo Bahu Quantan ma. Ispishanko Nebahu, Sito Bigu Bajano, King difference and pitfalls. The pitfalls that he thinks that the institution will Bigu Bajay and other will come.
Now for the questions. So we would like to move to the audience now, and we'd like to take questions here. So should we, yeah, please. So should we take all the questions at once, or do we take them in turns? I think we can take some questions, and then maybe the panelists can answer these questions, and then we can go in for a second round of questions. If that works, yeah. Please introduce yourself and ask the question. Thank you.
I'm Shumato Raichaudhary from India Abroad News Service. Shraddha, my first question is for you. You have seen Darjeeling for a long time. When you were Darjeeling and Asian is Kolkata. So it said that Subhash Keating said that my movement is not against Bengalis, but against Bengal.
Yeah.
But there is a counter narrative to that, which I heard from my uncle, who was a colonel of the Gokra Regiment, and my maternal grandfather, who was a lieutenant colonel with the British Gokra Regiment. They used to narrate when I was a student from their Gorkha subordinate soldiers. They used to narrate stories how the Gorkhas were originally between the independence period. The Gorkha men and women, both especially women, were exploited by Bengalis going to Darjeeling either as tea garden managers or as administrative officers. So do you think that's where the anti-Bengali sentiment then populated to anti-Bengal sentiment? My second question is to Anuradha ji is that since you have as an expert in the army section, as I have seen that in many literature and as well as in the movies, the history of Gorkha regiment is depicted in a very convoluted manner. The near correct movie was Sam Bahadur, but then a lot of things were different. So how do you think as experts in this way, these two things can be addressed?
Okay. Since I've covered Darjeeling as a journalist, I don't recall any time like
So this pre-independence period and continued for some time after that.
I don't know. It wasn't reflected during my time. Because we are Bengalis are they never just keep in mind. During the peak of the Gorkha movement, when 20,000 people were killed, 12,000, 1200 people, yeah. Not a single Bengali was hurt anyway. Okay, not a single Bengali was hurt. And then they were given safe passage. Even professors who was teaching in government college, I recall this very clearly because I was a student in government college. They were given safe passage to go down to the when the agitation spiked. They were given a safe passage because that's how I think. Like this brotherhood or whatever you call it between them, but it was always there. It always is. It still is. So, in the search of
I was
identity,
telling you the
collateral damage. Sorry.
I was telling it on experience shared with me with my mentor.
No, I don't know. I have not lived to that.
So individuals clearness notwithstanding it. The bottom remained, the relationship remained. They lived together for so many years. So these are individual wisdom matters. That might be done by anyone. I mean, this is
I would like to add to this. I would like to add to this. See, this power structure there, Bengali as those in power, and Nepalis or Gorkhas as those in. So I wouldn't rule out the the feeling that of resentment that that you would have against power. I mean, that's how I would like to word it here, but I wouldn't always present it as a very rosy kind of thing that, of course, largely it's peaceful, largely it is, there is harmony and all that. But I also can tell you that there is also a bit of resentment. And that stems from the fact, as you said, as as Bengal or Bengalis being seen as those in the holding power, right? So it comes, as you said, from the understanding because you are against the power that is the cause of all problems. So yeah. So yeah, what I mean to say was the question which you say, but the question could be some also the rule and the ruler. Question could be that way, but not as a community. Not as a community, but as a kind of thing. Anyone, what's his surname? Anyone Bhattacharya's book, The Hills of Valley. That's also on Burkhaland, by the way. But there he has written about what, like, he's written about, I think, killing of a Bengali headmaster, right? So I think he was also confronted with the same question that the movement was not anti-Bengali. So how is it that you write about Bengalis being so he said that this is a one specific instance that I did see or I did, I did find in my research and therefore I write about it. So there, to completely rule out that there was nothing against Bengalis or people did not do it. I mean, of course, maybe Subhash Singh didn't will it or maybe it did happen, this thing. But there might have been, at least I wouldn't prove that there might have been instances where this has happened. At least Onivan Bhattacharya, who studied in Kalimpong, and at least he says that in his research he found it. So if you hear it from a Bengali, I think it has happened.
I mean, it's very kind of, add to that, to clarify your question with what you said. I think a lot of it has to do with how the character Bengali, I'm speaking specifically, have also tended to see Darjeeling from a very colonial hangover vantage point of view. So we rarely, just in a second, please, we're taking more questions, just a second, please. So a lot of how the Calcutta Bengalis have seen it is through the Kanchenjunga and the galleries, and really little more than that. So perhaps part of the reason we must stem from that kind of culture. So yeah, but we to the next.
oh yes, yeah, obviously. And just
Yeah, I'm gonna write this, somewhere.
Yeah.
Shruti Kapoor, journalist and not experts. So I'm not an expert, and I'm not. I'm neither am I there with a big goal of setting things right. Not question. Goal height. Like, of course, I.
Distorted, both identity and distorted.
I think there are so many distortions throughout, and it's not just Gorkha identity for that matter. And what is Gorkha identity?
what is going on?
What is so we are I think sir is in a better position to answer this and I'll give it to him. As far as I am concerned, but I don't even ask.
Yeah, so we can another question. Yes, please. Can you
Observation. It's
that
I'm from Darjeeling. My family had was fairs with it. So we are a very old family there. And now I'm settled in capital, of course. But regarding this thing between the Nepalese and the Bengalis, well, I can only say that we never faced it. We never faced this resentment. But you might say that we were almost a Gorkha there. But true. But then the thing is, what you said about the Calcutta people observe, like their attitude towards the locals in Darjeeling was just that. It was
British
they didn't
colonial.
understand them the way that we did because we grew up with them. And we are like we spoke that language, even our Bengali kids kind of, started with words. Whenever we all get together as a family, it's that tone, even if you're speaking in Bengali, it's that tone and we put it
I think
we need to do more into, so this is what I wanted to say. That we really didn't feel, I won't say feel, but we never felt that antagonism, towards the Bengalis as a community. But people who wanted, had that attitude, no, they are this, they are that, they must have felt it.
I think given this like caricature, it's very well. If we want to take another question. Yeah. Yeah, please introduce your last question.
not that's listener about sorry. I'm from Assam. I translate from Assamese to English. Another knows I am a fellow journalist too. It would be interesting to listen to Shanda because I what is called Angola for education in Assam. We have gone through that. And at the time, there are lot many people just came about. Now there is post Angola, all this alpha sulfur, whatever. Lots of literature is coming out, and the voices, and especially of women voices, and especially the Sahitya Academy Award winner Olpa Pipankya Kalita, whose I have to stay away. There are lots of stories, and especially women, how they suffer through it. And it is very important to tell the stories, I think. That's why I'm talking from the women's point of view. Because a whole generation of young people, I know, they didn't go to school. They lost a whole generation of studying. And today, so-called quote unquote, and many intellectuals who supported them, they are saying that it was wrong. It was wrong. Yeah, it was wrong because they lost a whole generation and appreciate next generation. And going to Anuradha's talking about resentment. I am also from Shillong, and I know because before Meghalaya, so we Assamese people, we are called Utkars, Videshi, and we also as women. I remember when I was in school and when teenagers, parents did not allow us to go in the evening alone, but that part is gone. But it's also part of our somebody said that your history in the mind, the trauma, events. And sometimes people talk about it. And also, I think if you talk about it, it's a chronicles of time. That's very good.
Yeah. Thank you. One more. You got another question here. Then after you.
Yeah, one thing that comes through all the three books when I read them is the love of the reading. And in something that I mentioned, that there's a use of memory and nostalgia. And the first thing they talk about is the hills, the fresh air. Yeah, and I would like you to dwell on that. This region is also a beautiful region. And it's if you could take on the nature and talk a little about that. Something that in Bengal, for example, we talk about Nodi, talk about rivers all the time. But in Darjeeling, it's the hills that bring back.
What do I say about the hills? What can I say? Okay. See, God has like we've been deprived in many ways, but one thing we always say, we've got the Kanchenjunga, huh? We tell them, we tell the others. You might have many things. मेरे पास पाप है. We've got Kanchenjunga. So that way, we are very privileged. We are very absolutely privileged to have Kanchenjunga. We've got our own shares of troubles and problems, but when I have a room which looks directly like right across Kanchenjunga every morning I take a look. And I'm never satiated. It's always that thirst is always there to have a look of Kanchenjunga. So you can see like it uplifts you. It's the closest to heaven that you can be. Kanchenjunga, I think it's the closest to heaven which anybody can be. Okay, and in the evening, when it gets dark, it's like the sky has the entire hills they are lit up with the twinkling stars, and it feels as if the heavens have come down on earth. That's all I can say. It's beautiful.
But we would like when you see the tropics.
Absolutely.
Like it's
But you shouldn't look down because it becomes very dirty. You should look down on the streets. Don't look at the trains. Don't look at the roads. Just keep your gaze up there. Keep your gaze to the hills.
but nature is also not been spared.
No.
Right.
Nature has not been spared at all. Trees have been felled.
Exactly.
I just wanted to add just a little bit is the hills are such things, they inevitably end up as characters in yours.
Yes.
And that's because, even when I was, when I'm doing stories, like reporting, like for journalism, I did an article on the 1955 uprising in a tea garden, labor movement, and then how these things come, how this person, Dada Mati Kubera, Dada is a kind of Indian term. So she was, so the whole thing, Dada, and Kolai, they come in your story. So they just enter the story as as characters. So I think that's the thing about it being real. So
Yeah.
I think Papyadi she'll agree. Papyadi, right?
Yes.
Yeah, she'll agree. You can leave the hills, but the hills will never leave you.
Never.
Isn't it?
I have a question. Can we take
Yeah.
All and the Maya Brazilian. Maya Islam.
Uh-huh.
I'm not here to be
Only
say that.
another question? You have time.
Yeah, please, please. We'd like to take questions here. Observations.
Well, thank you. My name is Mordina Jain, and I'm an elderly woman who has been publishing for a long time, for like 5 years as an independent publisher. Two lists are called STREET, which means people not women. And another one called Samya, which deals with equality and inequality, so all kinds of books. I want to tell you that for a tired person, it's been most riveting to hear such imaginative, you know, such imaginative words from you all. And there's obviously a cultural movement going, and it's fast, and I'm interested to see that it's come to fruition now. So what was behind it? Because if there's four of you, there may be more. We don't, as Rekha mentioned, who we've not met. So there's a whole thing going on in the mountains that you don't know about, and it's really a good thing. What say brought about, say, over the past 4 or 5 years? Is it economic change? Is it social? Is it women coming into their own? That's what's interesting.
who wants to take this question? I can
See, I think for a long time after the agitation, after the movement, after the violence, there has been a spiral of silence, I think. I think I should use this term, like it was a stunning effect. Nobody could voice it. We were stunned. The whole place was stunned. And now I think the people are finding their voice. And probably because women have been empowered more now, they're getting more empowerment. I think that's the reason why we are having voices from the hills. It's a good thing. And there are indeed independent publishers who are coming, they're giving us a platform like Lekha. She's been giving us very beautiful platforms. There are other independent publishers because big publishers, they won't take us.
No, but it's almost like a new women's movement.
It is. It is. It is a new women's movement. Why?
Right. Because I would like to add the larger scene, larger writings from Shiliguri, Darjeeling. Of course, economic aspect, but it's
Yeah.
because I think there was a time in my generation or earlier, we were busy, our parents were trying to survive. We were trying to survive, and I don't think the education literacy was also that high. And we wouldn't see, মানে in our mind, শিক্ষিত মানে বাঙালি, আর যদি কোনো অশিক্ষিত portray করতে হয়, we would be a Nepali or somebody. So, and we grew up, and that's something like, I think, that has changed. In fact, if you, if you go to Shiliguri and all, if you go to banks, if you go to any place, you see so the education level has increased, of course, and then people are, the stereotypes of Nepalis not doing intellectual jobs is now no longer holds true, and people are, and of course, and then I think that has created the space for writing. And of course, economics is also, I think people have more disposable income, and there has also been a cultural resurgence, so to speak. Because when I grew up more like, erasing my Nepali identity. I was trying to fit in more like, it's a lot of the customs, lot of the traditions. Because I grew up in a place in a Bengali dominated place. I had to be taken seriously among everybody else. So I grew up where I and so then but now culture there is instead Tyohar so people like of course like how people what's the Renaissance it's fascinating. Instead of us folk forms and women particularly like women are now playing Normati Baja. That's more true to say Nepal. Normati Baja হচ্ছে বিয়েতে we play this light musical instruments which is basically played by, and it's a Dalit movement, it's basically played by the Dalit community and male thing, and women are doing that. So I think women's role is very interesting in that case. So there is more cultural revolution, so to speak, and people are celebrating traditional customs and all that. Also, I guess awareness and writing is a part of that. I think you're going back to a and also the fact that now we have the language. Now we have English language. Yeah. And for a long time, the English speakers and Bangla speakers have been writing, and we haven't. So might as well do it. And it's very important. More recently, now coming to very specific, Fatsu was translated into English and went on to be shortlisted for the JSP Prize. That really got the big publishers excited. And after that, and then a lot of other translate, Pulange got translated by, and Penguin published the translation Seeds of a Planet. So that thing also created a lot of buzz. And another thing, like again, Shudain is not here, but he is a star here because he's another book called Urmal. Urmal, he got Madan Puraskar from Kathmandu for it, and Madan Puraskar, I think, after several decades, because the Madan Puraskar is given to writings in Nepali from Nepali Booker of Nepal, Booker of Nepali literature, so to speak. So I think about 40 years ago, an Indian Nepali had 48. Maybe it is 1 years, and then had brought it to today for his Urmal, got it first. So there is this writings from India, from Darjeeling, which is also now getting a lot of attention in say Nepal, elsewhere. So obviously that people are lapping out translations and
Personally,
personally. So Jamal hampered by say a lot of the hierarchies we have in the so-called names, the caste hierarchy, the social hierarchy.
No,
that stays a
that's very much clear. I mean, we don't talk caste. This is like the only part. There, we never discuss caste. And she'll always say we don't have caste system. But having said that, I feel that there are certain hierarchies, of course, and because I did a few stories, and when I spoke to people who have been at the receiving end of these structures, they have opened up about it. And so there is a kind of caste, of course, because it's a Hindu Nepali society. There are Brahmins, there are Kshatriyas. So it is not. Actually, the idea of Nepalis being a monolithic thing is where we are flawed. So there are tribals, there are non-tribals, there are Indo-Tibetan, there are like Tibetan Burmese. But I mean, I'm not an expert, but just to say that there are ethnicities of all kinds. So it's not one that
the space.
even that, and I think even that, and of course maybe it is not like as in other because we have and actually having so many ethnicities into this Nepali identity has diluted the caste, traditional caste structure.
Yeah,
So, so to speak,
it so happens that we are so cosmopolitan in the sense that every family, every Nepali family has got, like a Tamang married, or a Tamang daughter-in-law, or a Gurun son-in-law. It's so intermingled. You can't have it's become monolithic now, sort of.
this is something that happened in India.
right.
Of course, when they came, it's the purpose of going up of the going of Gandhi.
Right.
It all broke down, and there was Kurasi, Kaliki, or anybody.
Nepali overarching Nepali identity.
Like,
Caste gets diluted because of
Maybe from an identity problem, it's young boys and girls are going out. Started going out of Darjeeling. I found students in residency in the late 90s. Regular. One of them was teaching here. And he now is teaching in this university, Gorablama, from America. But I'm BJP, I think. And there are lots of students, Bengali boys and girls, teaching Bengali,
Exactly.
some of them are our students, some of them are not. They all come from Sharendra Pradhan, GB1, GB1 Show, was our schools in GB1, Joint College, the Government Professional College, the current country, Swarming Naidu College. One is in couple of more than one colleges are Gujarat colleges. So they've gone out of Darjeeling.
Right, exactly. Even I would like to mention to this is Bimal Lama. He works in a government department. He's from South Bengal, based in South Bengal. He's from Darjeeling. He writes in Bangla. And he wrote about Golkha long time back actually. And because he wrote in Bangla, nobody read there. Nobody actually knew Golkha ki actually. But then later, Gunja has been translated into Nepali by a Bengali, Shomik Chakraborty. So, yeah, Shomik Chakraborty is from Kolkata, but now.
As intercultural as it gets.
Yeah. Intercultural American. Siliguri. Because he is a Chavagan, what do you want, activist. So,
One person use
yeah, Shomika, yeah,
And just to actually follow me, simply to that, I think music wise, there has been a very, very long history of because Darshan music has traveled the globe in so many ways. You know, there are rock songs, think of so many mantra, I can think of somebody. There's so many of them. I can try to think travel everything. Which we have all the next trends.
he is supposed to permanent knowledge in the
ecosystem out there, but the other side of the coin is also there as a independent publisher and as a bookseller. Like it's still a challenge for us to sell books. Yeah. So that's another side to the coin. And I sort of like it's from hard job statements.
like
Like we have readers, but it's really very challenging to sell books and because especially Amazon is a, a big competitor and most of the books are available in Amazon at a very discounted price. And we as independent publishers at this point of time, we have taken this position as this conscious decision not to sell on Amazon and like just to like sell it through our website put its publishing and through Shoepiece and maybe just give our books to independent bookstores across the region and tomorrow I'm planning to visit some of the independent bookstores and just convince them to buy books from a show policy. So that's how we have been doing it and book sales increase when we organize sessions like this like there in Arnave also when we have a meet the author session or where when there is a book launch then book sales go up because then you have an interaction with the author and then you get author signed copies. So readers value that. You know, if you have an author signed copies, personalized copy for yourself. So these small events also help in selling books and getting in touch with the right kind of audience. But it takes a lot of effort. Yeah. Distributor and such, physical distributor. There in North Bengal we have new books. They distribute books. Yeah, but the yeah again a good chunk of profit also. Yeah.
One last comment from Vivani and then
What I must commend you on is quality. Certainly the model. It has gone right behind you. Is the quality one. It's the quality of the publishing, the editing, so beautifully produced. And that goes with the hard copy and the quality of the paper, the general typeface and the way you segregate the thing. So that comes to your eye, immediately when you see the book.
I think I have been blessed as a publisher also because like there are many persons who have been working and working as in like they are a part of the team, but they don't want to be, what do you say, like acknowledged. They're exploiting husbands. Yeah, so and we have the best husbands in the world. Yeah, yeah. So like you say, right, just in the editing process. Yeah, and it's like they were all doing those things. Yeah, and yeah, when Biskin did the editing, so of course, three Mashi will give Ami Jackie, but yeah, so they like because I mean she's a single person, so we had to pitch it. So I was doing the editing, so Nikhilesh came in, her husband, because the time you should have seen the typesetting process. My God, the somebody did it in Gangtok and Hotel, and they're doing the entire book. And her husband as well, he teaches chemistry and astrology, and he has no clue. But then he learns everything. He comes, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. And we were sitting at her cafe on the TV screen, working like that, and we in fact we did it all. A lot of multitasking. Sometimes I was sometimes rewrite sentences on the I found this one of the college. So a very high benchmark for yesterday. Yeah, I think being journalists helped because we worked in the